boyfriend said my career was a joke and laughed at my dreams, so I worked harder, climbed the ladder, and one day walked into his office as his new boss. You know how sometimes one sentence can split your life into before and after? For me, it happened in the middle of my own apartment on a Tuesday night while I was sitting cross-legged on the floor with my laptop open and a stack of half-finished vision boards scattered around me. At that point, I was 24, freshly out of college and working as a junior account assistant at a mid-sized marketing agency downtown. I wasn't rolling in money, I wasn't running campaigns that would go down in advertising history, but I loved what I did. Even the dumb tasks, formatting client decks, scheduling social media posts at odd hours, proofing copy until my eyes went blurry, they made me feel like I was part of something bigger. I had this dream of one day leading campaigns that people would remember, stuff that would end up on billboards in Times Square, or commercials that people would quote the way they quote Super Bowl ads. Yeah, it sounded wild, but that's how dreams usually sound before they're real. The problem? My boyfriend at the time, let's call him Jake, thought my dream was a joke. Jake and I had been together since my junior year of college. He was the kind of guy who walked into a room and acted like the room had been waiting for him to show up. Tall, good-looking in a gym rat way, always cracking jokes that made people either laugh or roll their eyes. He was studying finance, always wearing suits for his internships, even when they weren't required, and he liked to tell people he'd be running his own hedge fund by 30. At first, I found the confidence attractive. Being around someone so sure of himself made me feel like maybe I could be sure of myself too. But as the months turned into years, his confidence started to feel less like inspiration and more like arrogance, and it was almost always pointed at me. I still remember the night crystal clear. I had just finished sketching out ideas for this mock campaign for a sneaker brand. It wasn't for work, just for me, a little creative exercise because I wanted to practice pitching big ideas. I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by sticky notes when Jake came in. He had his tie loosened, that smug grin plastered on his face, and he plopped down on the couch behind me. "What's all this?" he asked, reaching for one of my boards. "Just some campaign concepts I'm playing with," I said. Like, imagine if Nike did a collab with a street artist, but the ads were interactive in real life. People could scan murals and unlock limited drops. I was excited, practically buzzing. I thought maybe he'd say something encouraging like, "Wow, that's clever," or even a half-interested, "Cool, babe." Instead, he laughed. Not just a chuckle, a full-on laugh that made me stop mid-sentence. "Oh my god," he said between laughs. "You actually think stuff like this matters?" My face went hot instantly. "What do you mean?" "Come on," he said, tossing the board back down. "Ads, social media posts, cute little graphics. You really think this is a career? It's a side hobby at best. Real jobs actually make money. Real jobs build things." I blinked at him, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is a real job. People literally go to school for this. Agencies run billion-dollar campaigns." He cut me off with that condescending tone I'd started to know too well. Sure, billion-dollar campaigns, run by the actual smart people, not junior assistants making TikToks for dog food brands. That one stung because, yeah, my biggest client at the time was a mid-tier pet food company, but it was my first account. I was proud of it. "You act like I'm not serious about this," I said quietly. Jake leaned back, stretched his arms over the couch like he was king of the world, and smirked. "Babe, you'll never amount to anything in this field. Honestly, you'd be better off doing something easy. HR maybe, teaching, something stable. Marketing is a joke." And there it was, the sentence that split my life into before and after. It felt like someone had just punched me in the stomach. My ears were ringing, my throat was tight, and I wanted to cry but didn't want to give him the satisfaction. I just stared at him. This man I'd spent 3 years with. This man I thought might propose in a year or two. This man I cheered for during every interview, every internship, every finance exam, and he thought my entire dream, my passion was laughable. I think something inside me snapped right then. "Get out," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He raised an eyebrow. "What?" I said, "Get out. If you think my career, my life, is a joke, then you don't get to be part of it." He looked shocked for maybe half a second, then chuckled again, like I was just being dramatic. "You're really gonna throw a tantrum over this? Babe, relax. I'm just being honest." "No," I said, standing up, fists clenched at my sides. "You're being cruel, and I don't need someone in my life who laughs at me instead of supports me. So get out." The smirk faded, and he stood up too. For a moment, I thought he might argue, maybe apologize, but instead he shook his head, grabbed his jacket, and muttered, "Fine, good luck with your little dream job. I'll be laughing when you're broke and begging for help." Then he slammed the door behind him. That night, I sat on the floor surrounded by my vision boards, tears streaming down my face. Not because I missed him. I realized in that moment I didn't. Not really. I was crying because someone I loved had voiced the exact fear I tried to bury deep down. What if I wasn't enough? What if I was chasing something that would never work out? But here's the thing about me. I don't stay down for long. By the time the sun came up, my tears had dried, and all that was left was this burning fire in my chest. Jake had wanted me to feel small, to give up, to shrink my dreams until they fit into his narrow definition of success. But all he really did was hand me fuel. I looked at my boards, at my messy sticky notes, at the half-baked campaign ideas, and I whispered to myself, "I'm going to prove him wrong. I'm going to prove everyone wrong." That was the night the switch flipped, That was the night the girl who second guessed herself died, and the woman who would one day walk into her ex-boyfriend's office as his boss was born. And I had no idea just how far that fire would take me. The morning after Jake walked out of my apartment, I made myself a promise. If I was going to chase this dream, I would chase it with everything I had. No more half efforts, no more second guessing myself because some smug finance bro thought he had life all figured out. And let me tell you something, chasing your dreams doesn't feel glamorous at the start. It feels like fluorescent lights at 9 p.m. while you're still at your desk, your eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets, wondering if you're actually cut out for this. That was my life for the next few years. I was working at this mid-sized agency downtown. To anyone outside the industry, agency life sounds cool and creative, like Mad Men, but with TikTok accounts. The reality? I was a glorified paper pusher, junior account assistant. My job was scheduling posts, updating decks, chasing down clients for approvals, and running for coffee more often than I'd like to admit. The pay was laughable. Rent ate half my paycheck, and groceries ate the rest. I lived on instant noodles and generic brand peanut butter. I thrifted clothes and patched them until they couldn't hold another stitch. And every time I looked at my bank account, I thought about Jake's words. You'll never amount to anything. But here's the thing I refused to quit. The agency culture wasn't exactly welcoming. The senior guys, the ones in sleek suits who strutted around like they were God's gifts to marketing, barely acknowledged me. When they did, it was usually to dump grunt work on my desk. I can't count how many times I'd speak up in a meeting only to be ignored, until a guy said the same thing 5 minutes later and suddenly it was brilliant. Or how often I'd stay late polishing a client deck, only for my name to be left off the credits because, well, you're just an assistant. And don't even get me started on the casual sexism, the sweetheart comments, the you should smile more. It makes clients like you remarks. The assumption that if I was good with design tools, it must be because girls are naturally artsy. It was exhausting. I felt invisible most days, like I could be swapped out for another 20-something assistant and no one would notice. And that's when the imposter syndrome started to creep in. Maybe Jake was right. Maybe this was all pointless. But then I met Linda. Linda was one of the senior account managers, probably in her early 50s. She'd been in the industry longer than I'd been alive, and she had this reputation for being terrifying, sharp, blunt, and impossible to please. People called her the Ice Queen behind her back. So you can imagine my fear when one night, around 8:30 p.m., she walked by my desk while I was still working. Everyone else had gone home. I had 3 empty coffee cups next to me and was frantically fixing a client presentation that my boss had dumped on me last minute. "What are you still doing here?" she asked, her voice flat. I froze, unsure if I was in trouble. Fixing the Grayson Foods deck. It's due tomorrow morning." She peered over my shoulder, scanning the slides. I braced myself for her to tear it apart, but instead, she nodded once. "Good work. Most assistants would have half-assed this and left by now." I blinked. "Thanks, I guess," she smirked. "Don't guess, own it. You've got an eye for detail. Don't waste it hiding in the background." And then she walked away, just like that. It was such a small thing, but to me, it was everything. Someone saw me. Someone noticed. From that night on, Linda became my unofficial mentor. Linda wasn't the type to coddle. If my work sucked, she told me straight up. If I missed a typo, she'd hand me the deck with a single raised eyebrow that said unacceptable. But when I got something right, she made sure people knew. She started throwing me small opportunities. "You handle the draft for this proposal. Why don't you run this brainstorm? Let's see what you've got." It scared the hell out of me every time. My hands would shake before I presented. I'd stay up all night obsessing over the details, but every little success chipped away at that imposter syndrome. Outside of work, I had one person keeping me sane, my best friend, Maya. Maya and I met in college, and she was the kind of ride or die friend who showed up at your apartment with wine and snacks after a breakup without being asked. She worked in HR at a startup and loved to remind me that corporate bros like Jake were a dime a dozen. Whenever I vented about being overlooked, she'd hype me up. "Girl, you're not invisible. You're the quiet storm. They won't see you coming until you're running the whole damn place." I didn't always believe her, but her faith into me mattered. Sometimes, when you can't see your own worth, you need someone else to hold the mirror up for you. My first big break came almost by accident. One of our clients, a small but growing skincare brand, was about to launch a new product. The senior team had put together a campaign that was fine, safe, predictable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. So I stayed late one night and mocked up my own version. It was bolder, riskier, and leaned into the idea of real skin, real stories, instead of glossy perfection. I never planned to show it to anyone. It was just me playing around. But Linda happened to see it on my desk the next morning. "Did you make this?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, just experimenting." She studied it for a moment, then said, "Send it to me. I'll show it to the client." I nearly fell out of my chair. "What? No, it's not. Stop downplaying yourself." She cut me off. "It's good. Let me worry about the rest." Long story short, the client loved it. They scrapped half the original campaign and used my concept instead. For the first time, people at the agency actually looked at me differently. I wasn't just the girl fetching coffee anymore. I was someone with ideas. Meanwhile, Jake was thriving, or at least he looked like he was. Social media made it impossible to escape him. Photos of him at rooftop bars in designer suits, popping champagne with his new finance bros. Posts about his big wins at work. humble brags about six-figure deals. I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. Sometimes, late at night, I'd scroll through his feed and think, he was right. He's winning and I'm barely surviving. But then, I'd remember that campaign. The look on the client's face when they saw my work. The way Linda had said, stop downplaying yourself. And I'd think, this is just the beginning? The years that followed weren't easy. I still had long nights. I still fought to be heard in rooms full of louder voices. I still wrestled with that nagging voice in my head that said I didn't belong. But I also started building a foundation, slowly, brick by brick, win by win. I learned to speak up in meetings even when my voice trembled. I learned to own my ideas without apologizing. I learned that being overlooked didn't mean I was invisible, it just meant I had to shine brighter. And while Jake was chasing quick wins and flashy titles, I was building something that would last. I didn't know it yet, but every late night, every ignored idea, every small victory, it was all leading me to the moment I'd walk into an office years later and watch his smug smile disappear when he realized I was the one in charge. But for now, I was still at the bottom, still climbing, and I was just getting started. By this point, I'd been at the agency for almost 3 years, long enough to know the politics, the cliques, and the unwritten rules, long enough to build a little confidence, but not long enough to be seen as one of the big players. I was still the girl people handed grunt work to, still the one clients barely remembered by name, still the one who got coffee runs whispered into her inbox like that was part of her actual job description. But everything changed because of a single project. It was the spring of that year and the agency had just picked up a new client, a mid-tier athletic apparel brand trying to break into the mainstream. They weren't Nike or Adidas, they weren't flashy, they were the kind of company people bought when they couldn't afford the big names. And the project, launching a campaign for their new running shoe line. On paper, it sounded exciting, but inside the agency, everyone treated it like a death sentence. The budget was small, the client was demanding, the product was, frankly, unremarkable. The senior team saw it as a lose-lose situation, too much work for too little reward. They all but shoved it aside like an unwanted stepchild. So when Linda came to me one afternoon and said, they want us to assign someone to lead the initial pitch. I'm putting your name forward. I nearly spit out my coffee. Wait, what? Me? I'm an account associate, not... She cut me off, her eyes sharp. You're ready, and frankly, nobody else wants it. So it's either you or it dies on someone else's desk. I swallowed hard. This was it. The kind of opportunity I've been begging the universe for, and also the kind of opportunity that could blow up in my face. The next 2 months nearly broke me. I lived at that office. I'd drag myself in at 7 a.m., chug coffee until my hands shook, and stumble out long after the cleaning crew had left. My apartment became a glorified storage unit where I occasionally crashed for a few hours before heading back. Weekends? Gone. Social life? Dead. Maya would text me memes and, "Are you alive?" Check-ins, but I rarely saw her. Even she started saying things like, "Girl, I miss you, but I know you're cooking something big," and she was right. I was cooking the biggest damn meal of my career so far. The problem was, nobody believed in the project. My own team treated it like busy work. The designers phoned it in, the copywriters gave me generic taglines that sounded like every other shoe brand. Half the time, I felt like I was dragging a corpse uphill while everyone else stood around watching. I can't count how many nights I sat at my desk staring at a blank screen, tears burning my eyes, whispering, "You can't fail, not after everything, not after Jake." Because make no mistake, Jake's voice was still in my head. Every time I hit a wall, I heard him laughing, saying, "You'll never amount to anything. Marketing is a joke." And every time I'd grit my teeth, take a deep breath, and push forward. The breakthrough came one night around 2 a.m. I was half asleep, drooling into my keyboard when I remembered something Linda had once said. Stop trying to impress the industry. Impress the people who buy the damn product. I sat up straight. I realized we were overthinking everything. The brand didn't need to be Nike. They didn't need flashy. They needed real. So I scrapped half the deck and started fresh. Instead of glossy ads with perfect models, I pitched a campaign built around everyday runners. Real people. The mom training for her first 5K. The college kid running off stress. The retiree proving age was just a number. The tagline? Run your story. Simple, honest, relatable. By the time the sun rose, I had mocked up visuals, drafted copy, and built a rough pitch deck. My eyes felt like sandpaper, but for the first time in weeks, I felt alive. The day of the client pitch, I thought I was going to vomit. It wasn't just nerves, it was the weight of knowing this was make or break. If I failed, I'd go back to being the invisible girl fetching coffee. If I succeeded, well, I didn't even let myself imagine that yet. Linda sat in the back of the conference room, arms crossed, face unreadable. The senior execs didn't even bother to show up. That's how little faith they had in me. It was just me, my slides, and a room full of skeptical clients. My voice shook at first, but as I flipped through the slides and told the stories, the mom, the college kid, the retiree, something shifted. I wasn't just pitching shoes. I was pitching why people run in the first place. By the time I finished, the room was silent. Then the client leaned forward and said, This is exactly what we've been missing. We won the account. Not just won it, the campaign went viral. Within months, people were posting their run your story journeys on Instagram. The brand's sales spiked. We got press coverage in industry magazines, and suddenly the same senior execs who ignored me were dropping my name in meetings. I got promoted to account manager. For the first time in my career, I felt like I wasn't just climbing, I was soaring. Here's the thing about success though, it's addictive. That project lit a fire in me I didn't know I had. I was sharper, more confident, more willing to fight for my ideas. I started raising my hand in meetings without second guessing. I started pushing back when clients settled for mediocrity. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, and people noticed. Linda started introducing me as the rising star of the agency. Coworkers who used to dismiss me now asked for my input. Even Maya said, "Damn girl, you're glowing different these days, like boss energy glowing." But while my career was leveling up, Jake's wasn't. I'd still see him on social media sometimes. The rooftop parties had thinned out. The flashy posts were fewer and farther between. Rumors trickled through mutual friends. He'd plateaued at his firm, known more for arrogance than results. He was coasting on charm, taking shortcuts, acting like the world owed him. And me? I was grinding, building, growing. The irony wasn't lost on me. He used to laugh at my cute little career, and now his own was stagnating while mine was gaining momentum. I didn't take joy in it. Okay, maybe a little, but more than anything, it reminded me why I left, why I fought, why I stayed when it was easier to quit. Because the insult that broke me had turned into the fire that rebuilt me. And I wasn't done climbing yet, not even close. You know that moment when you look back at yourself a few years ago and almost don't recognize the person you used to be? That's where I was. The girl who once cried herself to sleep after her boyfriend told her she'd never amount to anything was gone. In her place was someone sharper, more resilient, and hungrier than ever. I wish I could say the journey got easier, but the truth is, the higher you climb, the more brutal it gets. Every rung on the corporate ladder had sharper edges. The stakes were higher, the competition fiercer, and the politics uglier. But I had something most of them didn't: fire in my veins. And that fire had a name: Jake. Even years later, his voice lingered in my head. "You'll never make it. Your career's a joke." Instead of breaking me, it became the gasoline I poured on every late night, every risk, every impossible task. The first big turning point of this chapter in my life wasn't in the office, it was on a stage. My company sent me to a marketing tech conference in Chicago. At first, I thought I was just there to take notes and bring back insights for the team. But when one of the speakers dropped out last minute, guess whose name got pulled out of a hat to fill the spot? Mine. I remember standing backstage, my palms so sweaty I thought my cue cards would dissolve. It wasn't a massive crowd, but for me, it felt like a stadium. Rows of sharp-suited professionals, all with more years of experience than I had, waiting to see if I'd crash and burn. And then I spotted her in the crowd. Sandra, my mentor. She gave me the small, encouraging nod, like she was silently reminding me, "You've got this." So I took a deep breath, walked out there, and started talking about a small project I led, the one no one believed in that ended up doubling engagement for one of our clients. Halfway through, something shifted. Instead of seeing a sea of intimidating faces, I saw people leaning forward, taking notes, actually interested in what I had to say. By the time I walked off stage, people were coming up to me, asking for my card, inviting me to lunches. That day, I stopped feeling like the scared newbie at the bottom of the ladder. I felt like someone who belonged. After that conference, I started taking networking seriously. I used to hate the idea. It always felt fake, like schmoozing for the sake of it. But I realized something. Networking wasn't about sucking up. It was about building bridges. And the more bridges I built, the more opportunities flowed my way. I started attending events monthly. I'd fly out to New York, Louisiana, sometimes even overseas. I met people who challenged my ideas, introduced me to new tools, and most importantly, remembered my name when big opportunities came up. One CEO I met at a dinner even told me, "You've got something rare. Most people talk in jargon. You talk in stories. That's why people listen." That stuck with me. It became my trademark. But while my career was soaring, one chapter was quietly coming to an end. Sandra, my mentor, the woman who had taken me under her wing when I was just a terrified entry-level associate, announced she was retiring. I didn't know how to process it. On one hand, I was happy for her. She had put in her time and she deserved to enjoy her life outside of boardrooms and endless emails. On the other hand, I felt like I was losing my anchor. At her retirement party, she pulled me aside. I'll never forget what she said. "You don't need me anymore," she told me, smiling softly. "You've already outgrown the training wheels. But here's the thing. Don't forget to reach back once you're at the top. Someone out there will need you the way you needed me." I teared up because she was right. She had believed in me when no one else did, and now it was my responsibility to carry that forward. That night, when she handed me a small leather notebook filled with her old notes, contacts, and lessons, it felt like a literal passing of the torch. Now, here's the part you'll love. While I was rising, Jake, my ex, was unraveling. We weren't in the same circles yet, but the business world has a way of whispering secrets. I'd hear things at conferences, during dinners, through LinkedIn chatter. "Did you hear Jake Matthews bombed that campaign?" Apparently, he ignored all the analysts and went with his gut. Total disaster. He's talented, sure, but the arrogance, it's catching up to him. People are getting tired of his ego. Guys more interested in looking successful than actually being successful. I'd smile to myself every time. Not because I wished him failure, but because karma has a funny way of doing its job. He was coasting on charm and bravado, the very things he once used to make me feel small. But charm has an expiration date. As for me, every year brought a new role, a bigger title, a higher salary. I went from managing small campaigns to leading entire divisions. I got invited to closed-door meetings I used to dream about. I wasn't just executing ideas anymore, I was shaping strategy. And with each promotion, my confidence grew. I stopped questioning whether I belonged in the room. Instead, I started questioning how to make the room better. One moment that really cemented this was when I led a pitch to a Fortune 500 client. Everyone expected the seasoned execs to take the lead, but I volunteered. I built the deck, practiced until my voice nearly gave out, and when the day came, I nailed it. We landed the client. My boss pulled me aside after and said, "You've got leadership written all over you." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just climbing the ladder, I was building a reputation. Here's the thing, Jake and I still hadn't crossed paths, not directly, but I could feel it coming, like two trains barreling down parallel tracks, getting closer and closer. Every time I heard his name in some negative context, it was like a drumbeat in the distance, reminding me, you're going to see him again. And when you do, you won't be the same woman he left behind. And that thought, it didn't scare me anymore, it thrilled me. Because I knew one day I'd walk into a room and Jake would be sitting there, and for the first time, he wouldn't be the one holding power over me. It's funny how life works. You spend years grinding, sweating, sacrificing, and then one day, without even planning it, life serves you a moment so poetic you couldn't have scripted it better yourself. That moment for me started with an email. Executive Director of Strategy, Horizon Global. When I saw the posting, my heart skipped. Horizon wasn't just any company. It was one of the biggest players in the industry, with a reputation for bold campaigns, massive budgets, and international reach. It was the kind of place where legends were made. And the position? It wasn't just a promotion, it was a throne. The person in that seat shaped the direction of the entire firm. Yeah, I read the description 3 times before whispering out loud, "This is it." I knew applying meant stepping into the big leagues. I polished my resume until it gleamed. I rehearsed mock interviews in front of the mirror, practiced answering questions while keeping my voice calm, confident, unshakable. Every late night, every failure, every win had led to this. I wasn't the girl hoping someone would notice me anymore. I was the woman companies hunted for. Sandra's words echoed in my head. Don't forget, you belong at the top. So, with my heart pounding, I hit submit. 2 weeks later, I walked into Horizon's glass tower in downtown Chicago. The lobby was all sleek marble, chrome elevators, and expensive suits rushing past. I'd chosen a sharp navy blazer, hair pulled back, heels clicking with confidence I didn't quite feel yet. The receptionist smiled. "You're here for the executive director interview?" "Yes," I said, steadying my voice. "Great, they'll be with you shortly. Please wait in the conference room." As I sat down at the long oak table, I went over my notes again. Market trends, strategy frameworks, case studies. I was ready, and then the door opened, and in walked Jake. I swear, time froze. Jake Matthews, my ex. The man who once told me my career was cute and I'd never amount to anything. He looked older, still handsome, sure, but there was something sharper in his features, something worn. His confidence had curdled into arrogance years ago, and it showed in the way he walked into the room like he owned it. But the second his eyes landed on me, that swagger faltered. "Emma," he said, blinking like he'd just seen a ghost. "Hello, Jake." I kept my tone professional. Cool. My poker face was flawless. Inside, though, oh, I was screaming with laughter. Because there it was, the sweet twist of fate. My ex-boyfriend, the one who mocked me, was sitting across the table as the hiring manager for my dream role. He tried to recover, straightening his tie. "Well, this is unexpected." I smiled politely. Small world. The other panelists didn't seem to pick up on the tension, so the interview started. They fired off questions about strategy, market disruption, leadership philosophy. I was in my element, hitting each one with clarity and confidence. But the best part? Watching Jake squirm. Every time I spoke about a successful campaign I'd led, I saw his jaw tighten. Every time I dropped a metric, our engagement increased by 42% in 6 months. His pen would pause mid-scribble. He couldn't hide it. He was floored. At one point, one of the execs asked me, "What drives you?" And I looked Jake dead in the eye when I answered. Honestly, doubt. There was a time in my life when someone I trusted told me I'd never make it. And instead of breaking me, it lit a fire. I wanted to prove that person and everyone like him dead wrong. The room nodded thoughtfully. Jake's face went pale. The interview ended and they thanked me for my time. Jake avoided eye contact as I shook hands with the panel. Walking out of that building, my heels clicking on marble, I felt invincible. 3 days later, I got the call. "Emma, we're thrilled to offer you the position of Executive Director of Strategy at Horizon Global. We think you're exactly the leader we've been looking for." I accepted without hesitation. What they didn't mention on that call was the detail I found out on my first day. Jake wasn't my boss. He wasn't even my equal. He was a director of operations, which meant he reported to me. Walking into Horizon as the new executive director felt like stepping onto a stage. My office overlooked the city skyline, bigger than any space I'd ever had. My nameplate gleamed on the door. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Jake walked in, holding a folder. "Emma," he said stiffly, his voice clipped. "Congratulations." I gave him a polite smile. "Thank you, Jake. I look forward to working together." His jaw twitched. "Of course, I'll make sure my team aligns with your directives." In that instant, I saw it hit him. The humiliation, the irony, the fact that the woman he once belittled now sat in the chair above him. And I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. I just nodded, calm and professional, because that was the real victory. Over the next few weeks, Jake struggled. His arrogance clashed with my directives. He tried pushing back, tried undermining me in subtle ways. But here's the thing, when you've clawed your way up from the bottom, you know how to handle people like that. I shut him down with data, with results, with composure he couldn't rattle. And every time I did, I saw the cracks in his facade widen. The office started noticing too. Whispers spread. "She's sharp. She's the real deal. Jake's losing his edge." It wasn't long before he was sidelined. Projects reassigned, responsibilities trimmed. His humiliation was quiet but undeniable. One evening, long after most people had left, I sat in my office looking out at the city lights. Jake passed by, files in hand, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. And that's when it truly sank in. I didn't just prove him wrong, I outgrew him entirely. The girl he once mocked wasn't just successful, she was his boss. And the sweetest part, I didn't need to rub it in. My success spoke louder than any revenge could. So I leaned back in my chair, a small smile on my face, and whispered to myself, "Never a joke. Not for a second." And that's how fate handed me the most poetic victory of my life. The first time I sat at the head of the conference table at Horizon Global, it hit me. Not the power, not the title, not even the view from the 40th floor. What hit me was the memory of sitting across from Jake years ago, tears in my eyes while he told me my career was cute and my dreams were a joke. And now here I was, not only in the room I once dreamed of, but running it. I'll never forget that first meeting where Jake had to report to me. The table was long, sleek, polished, filled with department heads. The walls were glass, the skyline stretched out behind me like a painting. Everyone shuffled papers, adjusted laptops, waiting for me to begin. Jake sat halfway down the table, stiff in his chair, pretending to scroll through notes. "Good morning," I said, my voice calm, steady. "Let's get started." As I led the agenda, assigning priorities, setting deadlines, discussing strategy, I could feel Jake's eyes on me. The same eyes that once looked at me with condescension now couldn't meet mine without flinching. When it came time for his update, he cleared his throat. Operations has been managing. We hit a few setbacks, but let's focus on solutions, Jake," I interrupted smoothly. "What's your plan to address those setbacks?" The room went quiet. He fumbled for an answer, papers rustling, words stumbling. The Jake I once knew, smug, cocky, quick with a put-down, was nowhere to be found. I didn't smirk, I didn't gloat, I just nodded, wrote down notes, and moved on. That was the moment I realized I didn't need revenge. I'd already won. Still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the irony. There was a delicious satisfaction in the fact that the man who once laughed at me now had to justify his work to me. That every report, every update, every failure crossed my desk, and he knew it. Oh, he knew it. Sometimes I'd catch him glancing at me in meetings, like he was still trying to reconcile the Emma he once mocked with the Emma sitting in the corner office. It wasn't revenge. It was justice, written by life itself. Jake didn't adjust well. His arrogance, which might have worked when he was charming his way through mid-level roles, crumbled under real accountability. He missed deadlines, overpromised and underdelivered, tried to pass blame when things went wrong. But here's the thing about being someone's boss. You see the truth, clear and unfiltered. I saw his excuses for what they were. I saw the cracks in his leadership. I saw the way his team rolled their eyes behind his back, tired of cleaning up his messes. And every time I had to call him out calmly, professionally, a small part of me marveled at how far I'd come. He once had the power to break me. Now he barely had the power to keep his own job. Outside of work, my life had blossomed. I traveled for conferences, London, Tokyo, Paris. I gave keynote speeches to rooms packed with people who actually wanted to hear what I had to say. I was invited onto panels, podcasts, even wrote articles that got published in major industry journals. I bought my dream apartment downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen I actually wanted to cook in, a balcony where I could sip coffee in the mornings while the city buzzed awake beneath me. I had friends who cheered for me, colleagues who respected me, mentees who looked up to me the way I once looked up to Sandra. My life wasn't about proving Jake wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. One night, after a particularly long day, Jake lingered outside my office. "Emma," he said awkwardly, "got a minute?" I looked up from my laptop. Of course. He stepped in, closed the door behind him, and for the first time in years, he didn't look arrogant. He looked small. "I just wanted to say," he muttered, "congratulations. You've really made something of yourself." There was no warmth in it, no genuine admiration, just a hollow acknowledgement of reality. I smiled politely. "Thank you, Jake. I've worked hard for this." He nodded, eyes flicking down. "Yeah, guess I underestimated you." I didn't rub it in. I didn't remind him of the nights I cried because of his words or the fire he lit in me when he called me a joke. I just said, most people did, and then I went back to my work, dismissing him with a glance. He left, shoulders slumped, and that was the last time he ever tried to speak to me on anything personal. Here's the truth I wish I could tell the girl I used to be. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove yourself to the people who doubt you. You just need to prove yourself to yourself. Well, Jake didn't make me who I am. He was just the spark that lit the fire. Everything else, the long nights, the sacrifices, the wins, the losses, that was all me. And sitting in that office, leading meetings, traveling the world, mentoring others, I realized I wasn't living Jake's nightmare. I was living my dream. The sweetest part, I did it without ever lowering myself to his level. I turned pain into fuel. I turned doubt into drive. I turned dreams into reality. And now, every single day, I live life on my own terms. That's the end of my story. From the girl who was told she'd never amount to anything, to the woman who walked into her ex-boyfriend's office as his boss. Not a joke, never a joke. Just me, living my dream. Okay, this story reads like the ultimate slow burn revenge, but with a twist. It's not about destroying someone else, it's about building yourself up so high that their words don't even touch you anymore. The pacing across the 6 chapters really works because we get to see Emma start from absolute rock bottom, heartbroken, insulted, underestimated, and then steadily transform into someone powerful, respected, and in full control of her life. The fact that her ex-boyfriend Jake ends up beneath her, reporting to her, is such poetic justice. But the best part is that she doesn't gloat or sink to his level. She handles it with professionalism, which makes her victory even more satisfying. What struck me most was the realism in her grind. The long hours, the sacrifices, the self-doubt, the sexism she faces, and the small wins that build into something bigger. It's relatable to anyone who's ever been dismissed or told their dreams don't matter. By the time she reaches the top, you feel proud of her, like you've been on the journey with her. In the end, it's less about Jake's humiliation and more about Emma's empowerment. That's what makes it inspiring, not just entertaining. Honestly, a perfect modern revenge success story.